Thank you for joining me for another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dion. I'm with Bright Digit, specializing in development in the Swift space and Apple space as well. Today we have with us Jacob Gorbon. Hey, Jacob, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
So, Jacob, I've known you for, I want to say like the first time we met would have been like release notes, maybe. But did you go to release notes?
Yeah, I've been to all of them, yes.
Yeah, so that's probably the first time I met you back in 2015. Back in the good old days when we used to actually like travel and go to conferences and stuff. I miss those days. I've done, two conferences this year that I've spoken at that have been remote. I've got three more conferences actually by the end of the year that I'll be speaking at, all remote. All from the convenience of this wonderful home office here, which has its advantages, assuming nobody's home along with me who's little and requires a lot of attention. I think we're kind of in the same boat, actually. There's been an adjustment for me, certainly, because I have a lot of family members who live in this house. I don't know about you, but like I've worked remotely for 12 years now, 10 years almost. So what's new to me this year has just been dealing with like me and my wife scheduling and taking care of the kids while we're working, which that's the big curveball this year with COVID and everything with 2020. How about you? Has there been any big adjustments working remotely this year?
Well, I was in this lucky situation kind of as you are, that I was already working remotely. I've been in indie since 2009, like full-time indie. So like on this front, it was fine. Like I didn't have to adjust to working remotely. But as you have, like I have like my kids and there's like a school age. They're not very small, so like it's easier, but they were at home most of the time. I have one of my kids at home right now, and I can ask them to be quiet like for the next hour while we record, right, and not bother me with anything. So other than that, it was fine.
Yeah. How long have you been in indie? And kind of tell us a little bit about some of the stuff that you've been making over the last 10 years.
Like I started dabbling in Mac development on the side, like while I had a day job in 2005. I got my first Mac, and I was already like a hobby developer, and usually when I kind of tried a new operating system, and I like to try those, I would try to see, okay, how do you develop for those? And so I tried to do something for the Mac, which I had like almost like a app that I would try on different platforms to do, like my go-to project. And I did that, and eventually on the Mac, I liked the software environment. I started to learn about Cocoa and how this works and all these new concepts that are in Cocoa. And I also started to like the community of the Cocoa developers at that time. They were very open and helpful, and I could see that all people do business with that. And I never considered that really that much, like doing software and selling them directly. And so this first app that I did, it grew into like the first app in the business. This is what's now one of my Mac apps, Image Framer. So now it's in version 4, but back then it was the 1.0, like the ugly point 1.0. So I would continue studying on the side, and by 2009, it was still not earning anything much, but I found a like part-time partner, and we started to work on a new application, which is Cache Collator, which we also kind of still have and developing a second version of. And I decided to try and make it like indie full-time, and gave my notice at the day job, and it's been a pretty, I'd say like very lucky ride, but it was fine. Like I don't know, maybe I made less money, but I had a much more fulfilling and kind of relaxed life than the day job, I guess.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Going independent has been one of the best decisions I've made in my life, and just there's ups and downs financially, most certainly, but like I had to take that over the flexibility and like just the lifestyle over. It's worth the benefits quite a bit.
Yeah. For me, I had like I had a long commute. I had a pressure. I didn't see my family. So like all these, like I gained so many lifestyle benefits from going indie that kind of it outweighs all the like financial problems like we could have or like possibly. Now I do work also consult for a different company remotely as well. So my time is split between like managing my own products, my own team, and doing the consulting work.
Yeah, same thing here. Doing the consulting work and doing the independent stuff. Hey folks, so here's the thing. You're probably thinking to yourself, I want to build a brand new app. Or maybe you already have an app in the App Store. I think now is probably the time you're going to want to really optimize that app in the App Store. And what I mean by that, make it easy for people to find it and for people to download it. It's one thing that you can build this great app for the iPhone 12 or iOS 14 or watchOS 7. It's another thing being able to help folks who have their brand new iPhone or their hand-me-down being able to find all these new apps. And this is where AppFigures really comes in. They give you everything you need to do this all in one place. So if you have a really good idea or an app idea and you want to see how many people are searching for that, AppFigures is going to be your spot. If you already have an app in the App Store and you want to see what words you need to use or what terms you need to use so that people can find you easily, AppFigures is for you. And it's really easy. All you have to do is use their promo code EMPOWER3030 to get 30% off for the next 3 months. That's it. That's not asking a lot. And AppFigures, they don't just have this really great universal analytics dashboard. They also provide a lot of other great App Store tools for optimization. And that's really the name of the game. That's going to improve your visibility and that's going to help you find more users. AppFigures has more than a decade of providing mobile analytics and insights. And they also have this new tool called the Competitor Intelligence Dashboard. And that allows you to track competitor downloads and understand what strategies you're going to use so that you can grow your bottom line. That's the thing. You can have a great idea. You can get users maybe by personally reaching out to them. But if you can improve your visibility on the App Store, that's really the name of the game. So go ahead, head over to appfigures.com to try AppFigures for free. If you like it, both the new and existing customers can use the special code EMPOWER3030 to get 30% off for the next 3 months. So go ahead, give it a shot, and let me know what you think. And if you need any help, try out some of those new app teardowns that Ariel has been doing. They've been fantastic, and they've been really providing a lot of help to me, and I think to a lot of folks, to what they need to do to get their App Store apps up and working. So go ahead and try it out with the Empower 3030, get 30% off for the next 3 months, or try the link in the show notes below. Thank you, AppFigures, for sponsoring our show. So has any of your clients or anybody that you've worked with have had to adjust, not necessarily for you, but for the other folks that they work with, have had to adjust to dealing with remote teams and managing a remote team?
My client, no. So because I have one client and I worked for them for the last 5 years, so it's a very kind of consistent work environment, and they are mostly remote, as they already were. So unless maybe, I don't know, maybe their sales team, which was kind of had a local presence, as far as developers, they were already remote. So I guess they had to do like just, again, only a few adjustments.
That's good to hear, because I think like some companies have had a really difficult time adjusting to being remote this year. What are some of like the biggest lessons you've seen from other teams going remote or having to go remote?
Okay, so first of all, I think the biggest lesson is that it can be done, right? So I think the many companies like wouldn't believe, right, that they can work remotely. Like there would be more downsides than upsides, I guess.
Yeah, it certainly seems like this year it's accelerated. It's been going on very slowly as soon as technology caught up. I remember like 20 years ago when we had all the situation with airports after September 11th, like video conferencing became this big attraction and then kind of died out. Whereas like this year, a lot of companies have accelerated and found a lot of benefits to it financially, specifically when it comes to real estate, to not having to, have offices for folks. But it seems like this year it's really accelerated that move to remote.
Yeah, I think one of these examples is like maybe one of the largest Canadian software companies, Shopify, right? So they were all like in, I think, Ottawa region, if I'm not mistaken. And so again, with the COVID situation, so people start to work from home. They gave people like, some money to, like buy a chair or whatever, like for the home office. And, a couple of months in, they said, oh, we will now be what they called like the digital first company, right? Like, so like the new hires will default to working remotely. And maybe they can. There was another company in Canada in the news that, like, I think the largest software company, but it's kind of enterprise company. And they said, oh, we will just, like many people will not return home and we will just, sell one of our buildings.
Right. That's the thing, is like the ability not to have to pay for rent on a building is a big attraction. So what do you think are some lessons that folks should come away with when it comes to like dealing with a remote team?
Oh, well, remote work it's all about communication, right? So the communication style changes. And when you work in, at an office, you can, just knock on somebody's door or the chair, right, or the back, and ask a question kind of remotely. It's different tools, right? So first of all, the company or the team, right, they have to decide what tools they use for communication. And for many, it was already like, maybe using Slack maybe is like one of the most popular for smaller companies. And this is what kind of we're using at Apparent Software as well. So you have to agree on like what the style is while communicating, right? Like how you respond and have expectations about like what's reasonable, like time for people to respond, right? It's a big topic, but like communication, right? And I think the larger the company, the more, I guess, guidelines the company should have, like either the HR people or the leaders of the company set some kind of guidelines for like how people should talk on Slack, like how to respond, and what to expect. And like my clients who are a bigger company than mine, they do have that, and it helps.
So what are what do you mean by guidelines exactly?
Well, it could be, first of all, okay, if you have multiple channels, so what to post on each channel. If it's like you need a response, then again, on Slack, you can have these like emoji responses, right? And so like maybe even just know that you've seen like somebody wrote, maybe it's an announcement. So just maybe put in, I don't know, like an eye emoji that you've seen this announcement, right? Stuff like that. If
like a reaction emoji, essentially.
Yeah, reaction emoji, yeah.
Yeah, and I think like for me, the guideline has always been is like email is usually the slowest form of communication. Like that's something that you expect in like a few days. Then you have the emergency of using like something like a text message, personally texting somebody if it's really, really important. And to me, like Slack is somewhere in between, where it's like you want to get a hold of someone in a conversational manner, but you don't want it to be as slow as email, but it's not an emergency. And that's like kind of where Slack or Microsoft Teams is the other one I've seen as far as like communicating with folks. I am on, like 20 Slacks at least. I don't know how many you are, but it's like every specific API and every specific geographical area technology. And then, of course, every time I pick up a new client, they're on their own little Slack workspace. So I feel like I've become an expert in Slack accidentally over the last few years. The other thing I was going to say is like using mentions in a healthy way and making sure you are using DMs and channels properly. So what I mean by that is like a mention is a good way to get a hold of someone who's just not going to be like babysitting a specific channel in Slack. And the other thing is like some things could be DMs, but if it's something that could be helpful to a whole team, it might be worth putting that in a specific channel. That's, let's say you have Android folks or iOS folks. Like if it's something to the helpful to the whole iOS team, you may want to ask that question in the whole iOS team as opposed to DMs. Is there any other slick Slack tips you've run into?
I think this thing like about posting in the correct like channel or DM is the important like decision for everybody to make, right? It's similar to like you wouldn't want to invite just everybody to a meeting and kind of waste their time if they're not related to the questions you're asking, right?
Yes.
And this may be what leads to sometimes like proliferation of Slack channels, like even on smaller groups, right? Because maybe somebody is I don't know, like a manager maybe needs like, both see the marketing and the development side, but maybe the, the marketing team doesn't necessarily want to, see the development chatter and vice versa. So yes, this kind of etiquette, I think, becomes important, and not mentioning if you don't have to, like, or if it's not really urgent. And yes, I do feel kind of the same about like the email versus Slack versus text message kind of urgency. Right, hierarchy. So Slack is, I would like to have a reply relatively soon, but it probably, today or like the next big start of day, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're working like across time zones. So in my team, I have some people are like basically same time zone, but I have a developer in Poland, and so it's and I'm in Canada. So we have our time difference, and so that's fine, right? Like, so if I message him and he's already not working, and so he replies the next day, and that's fine, right? Or the same for me.
I think that's one of the things. Time zones definitely something I've had to get used to as I've worked with more people, and just being comfortable with that. But like this idea of asynchronous communication, you've talked about like how when you're in a workplace, you can just tap on somebody's shoulder or just go to somebody's cube and say, hey, I got a question for you. You really have to do that with Slack, and you have to have like a healthy attitude of knowing that somebody is not going to like message you back right away. And I like that because I always hated being interrupted in an actual office. I always found that to be unhelpful. And I think a lot of companies, they just don't like that. They want to be able to get a hold of you all the time and constantly interrupt you. And I think I'm hoping that the remote team thing teaches companies good habits at communicating in an asynchronous manner. Because if you really need to like talk to someone and you really need to like meet with someone, that's what scheduling meetings is really about. I don't know how you've found it over the last few years.
And like at the parent software, I do try something different now. So like the regular timing of like meetings and whatnot, it happened like we had like the weekly meeting where you have a small team, right? So we all get on the call, and it's like development, the marketing, the design. We kind of all hop onto the call, and we'll have our like weekly status and decisions and kind of tasks for the next week. I did find, well, sometimes it's just kind of takes too long a time. So like if somebody gets either stuck on something, or they're not, banging their head and they're just afraid to ask, like again, in a different environment, maybe they would just, come by and ask and say, oh, I have difficulty with that. Either because of Slack, or again, maybe like personal styles, people will sometimes keep kind of to themselves and kind of keep trying to solve the problem instead of like asking for help, where this could save a lot of time. And so I did ask for now, from developer and designer to, and kind of be trying as an experiment where they will like end of day will, write me, okay, I've been working on that, and then maybe I'll be like working on that tomorrow. And if I had like any difficulties, are the difficulties, or
so basically like a stand-up. That's what it kind of sounds like.
Yeah, it's basically like a daily stand-up, yes, but instead of like in the morning, especially because again we're different time zones and everybody's remote, so like we don't do it at like set time, right? So people just usually like end of their day, whatever time they decide, they will kind of say, okay, I did that. And I see with the developer, so like my developer, he's like a junior developer. So, I help him in like mentoring him. And thus, like I can see, maybe he's stuck here, or maybe he says I'm stuck here, and I can help it more like quicker than previously. He would sometimes like wait several days before kind of, maybe mustering the courage to ask or whatever. Like maybe he didn't feel comfortable asking. And so I wanted to encourage that. And it doesn't necessarily mean I will reply right away. Maybe maybe in a different time zone, or maybe I'm busy with my client work or whatever. But at least it will be, it will not take more than a day, or like probably several hours to get like to the point. And so far, again, in this experiment, I find it helps. It helps me to understand again where my team stands, and like especially like with regards to the weekly tasks or whatever. And with the development, it helps me help the developer quicker, and that's also kind of run the project maybe a bit quicker as well.
That's a really good point about the junior developer. How do you create an encouraging environment for them to ask questions? Because I could see how somebody might be intimidated by that, especially a junior who might think, oh, they're not going to think I'm very good if I ask these questions, so I should just keep my mouth shut and waste time.
Yeah, well, just as we started, and this developer did work in a different place, like for several months, like as his first job, where he wasn't encouraged to ask for help and was kind of like, I guess, reprimanded for it because he was wasting other people's time. And
right.
Of course, it wasn't very helpful for him. And when we started to work together, I was very kind of, I was encouraging that right from the start, saying, if you have any questions, ask me. And like I never reprimand or anything, right? I try to explain. I will ask questions, so like he will try to get to the answer by himself. So like, and he learns how maybe like to think, right, or how to use the tools, or so encourage the learning. But I think he was maybe just trying to learn by himself. Again, he's a self-taught developer, so. I'm a self-taught developer, so it kind of makes sense for me. Okay, I was banging my hands sometimes, like for hours or days to find a solution to something. But sometimes it would have been nice to have an experienced developer to ask in the beginning of my career, and especially like there was no Stack Overflow and no Slacks for like different topics, right? So
punch cards, right?
Well, not that far away, but I've used tapes and like before the Mac, right? I was using the
discs,
ZX Spectrum. Yeah, before the diskettes and floppy disk. Before that, even like the tapes. So I just encourage that, and I think now with the kind of the daily stand up kind of report, which sometimes is like he would just say, "Oh, I'm just stuck on that," right? And this would be kind of the report, and then kind of would try to help him. And kind of guide him to the solution. So I think this helps, right? Because just to save everybody's time, basically.
Yeah, and I think like daily stand-ups are a great way to encourage like that kind of communication, because he's forced to basically say what he's stuck on, and also realize he's not the only one who's stuck on stuff and has pending questions.
Yeah. In this case, we don't do that like publicly, so they just each message me, but especially because one is a developer, one is a designer.
Yeah, right.
So like they don't necessarily kind of interact as far as like their tasks don't meet usually, unless the designer works specifically like on software, then maybe it would change, but it's not the case now. Now the designer works more with the marketing.
Hey folks, I want to let you know about Linode. Linode is one of my favorite cloud server tools out there as far as hosting is concerned. You may have seen my latest project, Orchard Nest, where I have built a website completely in Swift for showcasing some of the latest and greatest blog posts, podcasts, and videos in the Swift community. And that site is completely hosted on Linode. In fact, I can tell you that the server is in Newark, but they have servers all around the world, everywhere from Toronto to Mumbai. So you can set up anywhere, or you can set up load balancing and share your site everywhere as well. But it has been a really fantastic tool in building Orchard Nest, and it really does a great job showing me like various CPU usage and IP4 traffic, IP6 traffic, disk IO, etc. It's been awesome, and it's been consistently running great. And I think it's a really great, you get a lot for your price, especially for developers who really want to build stuff hands-on and get the developer tools they need to start their brand new server project. So go ahead and give Linode a shot. The link to Linode is in the show notes below. Use that to let them know that you heard about Linode from this show. They've been awesome. I really enjoyed hosting Orchard Nest on Linode at orchardnest.com. It's been fantastic. They have all sorts of great tools. Get yourself a nice, simple Ubuntu server and start working on that Vapor application you want to today using Linode. Again, use a link in the show notes below to let them know you heard about Linode from us, and hopefully you can get started on your new project today. What are some other big challenges you've seen with like developing software in remote teams?
I guess the code review, right? And I know today there are tools for that kind of should help with that, but I didn't try any of those. So with the developer, it's usually either we just open, I would open on my Xcode, or he would paste a bit of code, and I will kind of go from there and look again, like open the project in Xcode and see what's there, and kind of guide him this way. But like remembering from my day job days and like even university, like having somebody like right by your shoulder, like where we actually like looking at the same screen.
Yeah.
At the same time, like when other one person navigates and the other kind of talks or checks. This kind of was helpful, and I don't use any of those tools yet.
Yeah, I know like Tuple is a big one that's been in a lot of circles I've seen people have been raving about. There is some stuff with like GitHub and GitLab, for instance, where you can do like code reviews within a pull request. There's things like that. That's good for like asynchronous, like, oh, I want to review a code, but you still like you're saying, kind of, you need to have like a call, like a phone call or something where you can like say, hey, this is exactly what I meant about like how you need to change this specific architecture here, and like go over that stuff. And I completely agree with you, especially with like a junior developer. They need like the hand holding essentially to know like how to fix some of the issues in the code.
Yes, and like, the simplest would be just screen sharing. So we sometimes just go, okay, let's go like a Google Meet or something and share the screen, and this kind of a simple, like two people looking at the same screen.
Speaking of Git and version control, what are some issues you see crop up with remote teams when it comes to that? Anything in particular?
I don't know. I'm not very like detailed about how to work with Git. Well, we do use Git and we do use branches, and we merge them and all that. But again, we're not a large team.
Yeah,
I mean, it still helps, and I'm trying to do like the the kind of like the version, not version, like feature branches. It's I know it's always a struggle for me as well, like how atomic to do the commits, right? I would usually not spend the time to like rebase and the commits, but I will try to make the best I can during the commits, right? So kind of, okay, I fixed that, or I added this feature, I'm trying something, okay, I will try to commit that. But with larger features, something's complicated, right? If you need to like develop a new feature that goes like along with the UI and the the kind of like the back end and sometimes it just all has to grow together. So I will just have like a work in progress commit, right? Maybe at the end of the day, and not necessarily break this up, because sometimes it's really hard to break up like a wide front of development where kind of you go across the whole like cross section of the app, let's say, right? The development.
Yeah. We'll be talking more about Git actually in the next episode. I have Ben Chatelain coming on to talk about Git and Gitmojis and all the different things people need to know about when it comes to Git. So definitely you want to catch that next episode when it comes out, probably next week.
I'm like sure to listen.
Git is just such a deep subject. There's always like 500 ways of doing stuff, even more than you just realize. So one of the issues, specifically in the Apple space, is dealing with like team management and developer teams and certificates and all that stuff. How do you deal with that as with your indie team, essentially?
Within the limits of the what they allow, right? Like with the teams and development, it's pretty, I guess, straightforward, right? You add a developer, you allow them access to specific apps. So the developer I have in Poland, so he works on the iOS app we have called Socialite. And so he has the basically like almost like all the rights to to commit the app to the for review and to the App Store. Both he and the the product marketing person, she also has access to that, Susanna. With the provisioning, it's always a headache. Like I never quite understand provisioning 100% how this works, and we just solve as it goes. Like luckily, Xcode became better with managing that for development devices. So this is fine. For the Mac apps, I do the releases. So
are you in the App Store?
Yes, but
okay,
both App Store and Direct for the Mac apps, of course. Yeah.
So what other challenges do you face developing in the Apple space and still being a remote team?
Well, for me, again, in the Apple space, I was always remote, so I don't know the other way. But I would think that the larger the team gets, and maybe if you have a QA, then a remote team will have to have their own devices, right? Everybody, so you cannot share maybe test devices and stuff like that. So that might be a bit of a problem for some teams, that they have to spend more on maybe on equipment for a remote team. Other than that, I don't think there's anything special about Apple development versus other types of development, right? Because it's just because for Apple, we usually develop for the devices, and so everybody has to have the devices, or you have to ask, right? So maybe if I have the I have this kind of iPhone and the other person has this kind of iPhone, then okay, everybody has to to test a little bit, right? And this is the other thing again, because there's no pool of devices in one place.
And then the other thing, do you use any sort of continuous integration?
No, we don't. We're such a small team. And I used to have it at one point. I used to have an Xcode server at Mac Mini Colo.
Yeah, right.
Before they changed names. And I was using that for one of the Mac apps when I was working with a different remote development team. And so I had this set up, and then when this app has tests for the data model, and so it would run the test. When it, so it was in a way helpful. But when I stopped working with a team, and it was pretty kind of stable, and just managing and paying for that, and I eventually, after maybe a couple of years, I disabled that account. I thought of maybe having something like that at home, but I don't know. I'm still not at that scale where I see that as a problem that I need to solve.
Right. So, Jacob, before we close out, one of the biggest challenges I think folks face, especially with asynchronous communication and such, is, we kind of touched on it with our junior developer, but how can you make sure that team members are spending less time waiting for something that they're stuck on, and that work is constantly queued up, so that way, if there's something they're waiting on, they can always work on something else. What are some ways that you've found to really help your team stay active?
I can relate to that question because I was once on a different remote contract where I was in the situation where I would sometimes get stuck, and I would finish my task and would not get the next task. And it was also across the ocean, my client was across the ocean. So I would have to wait till maybe the next evening for me to get the next task. And of course, it wasn't very, very helpful, right? Because I couldn't build. And so in my case, with my team, what I'm trying to do is, yes, I'm trying to make sure we have the tasks. So one thing is, we have these weekly meetings, and we go through them. And I would usually try to make sure we have several things going at the same time, if there's smaller things. And so often we will have more tasks maybe queued than we can fit in the week, right? But just in case something goes quicker, people can go. And if somebody is stuck on something one thing, again, more so maybe in marketing and design, again, we have a multitude of tasks, and so they can jump maybe to something else right now, while they're waiting maybe for an answer. I think designers does that quite a lot. He has not necessarily he's waiting for an answer, but he is just a variety of tasks, and he would split his time, I guess, based on his preferences or mood or or anything, right? But at any case, like there's always enough tasks. With the developer, I think like one thing is, well, first of all, you can give like larger tasks, right? So like just that they're not kind of finished like in the middle of the week and waiting for the next weekly. The other thing is what kind of we talked about, where it introduced like the daily, right? Like the daily stand-up from Agile, right? And this way, if they get stuck, then okay, they'll not get stuck for a long time. And what helps with that also is for development projects, especially like, right, is like they plan the projects and like ahead of time and break into smaller tasks, right? So like, again, if you take maybe, I don't know, like either it's waterfall or Agile, like whatever methodology kind of you're using, but just having like the tasks and maybe assign them ahead of time even, right? And so like if the developer finishes one, okay, he knows this is the next one. What can help with that is also have some kind of, like a project management tool or maybe some other like tool. So like we use Asana mostly for both the design and the development.
Okay.
Asana is maybe not like the first choice for development teams. And, people use either like Jira, maybe like in the most like heavy case, but designers don't like Jira, and kind of it's not for that or the marketing. And Asana is it's like a good middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
You can make it work for like software tickets. Again, it's not as good, but you can make integrations or like find integrations and integrate with like backend tools if you need like Git or GitHub or anything. But we use it more like lightweight, but it has tools now that work well, like the timeline, and it's easy enough to use that like everybody, like both like different contractors I worked with, like everybody find themselves comfortable using Asana. And so this is kind of the heart of the business. And so like all the like long-term tasks and like the planning and like software like issues or like the sprints, we all manage that in Asana.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Jacob, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
Where can people find you online?
Well, my personal account, like I'm most active on Twitter. I think Twitter was like a godsend in the early days of indie development on the
right
in the Coco space, and like wherever I go to conferences, people exchange Twitter handles. So mine is just Jacob Gorban, just like the full name. I also write like through micro.blog. So like my personal homepage also like a gorban.org. It's like my last name GORBAN.org.
Okay.
And the company is Apparent Software, but the domain is apparentsoft.com.
Awesome. If people have any questions, they can reach us on Twitter. I'm at Leo G. Dion, and my company is Bright Digit. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to talking again. Bye.
Bye-bye.